While we have faced challenges before, this one is different. We will be with our friends again. We will meet again.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Countrywide Conveyancing Annual Conference 2021. It will be no surprise to hear that this year's conference is going to feel and look a little bit different as we continue to socially distance. Nevertheless, the senior leadership team have been busy working hard to bring you the latest in terms of strategy and, importantly, what lies ahead in the coming year and the vision for the future. The conference programme has been devised into bite-sized chunks so that you can continue to balance your day-to-day business activities. We know how taxing it is to be on a computer screen all day, so we've intentionally broken up the content into bulletin-style updates. And it's my job here in this lovely studio to link all the pieces together in one seamless viewing experience. Or at least that's the plan. So please sit back and share in the knowledge that, albeit remotely, you are enjoying what the business has to communicate together as one Countrywide conveyancing team. And here, to bring proceedings to a formal start, please welcome Chief Operating Officer Darren Hall.
Thanks, Alice, and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 Conveyancing Conference. Exceptional times, exceptional people. I must admit, after the success of last year's conference at the Hilton in Birmingham, which I know so many of you enjoyed, I was rather disappointed that we couldn't get together again because of lockdown. But I'm absolutely delighted that through the power of technology, yes, CCS and technology, who would have thought those two would go together? But over the next 3 days, we'll be bringing you a virtual conference packed full of content, business updates, some very special guests indeed, and of course the annual awards ceremony with some fantastic prizes to be given away. So stay with me, I really hope you enjoy the conference. So you remember at last year's event we opened up with a slide showing our simple strategy, which was to create a bigger and better business. If we had known then what we do now, that strategy probably would simply have said, just survive the year. What a year it's been. We've gone from the excitement and promise of a Boris bounce to a global pandemic impacting people and businesses across the planet. We'd normally hold this conference in January, but because of the stamp duty deadline, we put this back, and I'm so glad that we did. Because in January, I would have been talking to you now about uncertainty within the Countrywide group, about some trying times ahead, and asking you just to stick with us and believe in us. Fast forward to April, to now, and we're part of the Connells and Skipton group of companies. We now have a solid foundation underneath us again. We have no debt, and I'll say that again, we have no debt. We have a very experienced leader in David Livesey running the group. We have Paul Wareham still. That's always a good thing in my book. And we have huge opportunities ahead. Something that I just would have struggled to have said to you in January time. And both David and Paul will be talking about those opportunities later on. But in short, we're in a different place now, and it's a good place to be in. The challenge we faced last year really cemented for me what makes this business great. The resilience, the commitment, and the energy that you all demonstrated throughout the pandemic was just outstanding. It's because of how well you navigated the new processes, the remote working, the constant changes, the unprecedented volume of work, that we will go on to have a record year in 21. I just know it. There are a few areas that stood out for me. We had to make some very tough decisions, and it wasn't nice. It wasn't nice at all. But it was the right thing to do for the business, to protect not only the business, but to protect all of us and our jobs. And we came through it. We reacted quickly to ever-changing rules. We adapted. We were more agile than I think we've ever been in this business. And that's something we simply cannot lose. We have to take that agility and that fast-paced approach forward with us into the future. And I said last year that we're not a conveyancing business, we're a people business. And we just happen to do conveyancing. Well, God, has that been proved true this year? I've never been more proud to see people helping each other out, supporting, listening, coaching, just being there for one another. It's been humbling to see how much you really care about each and every one of you. You should be very proud of what you've done, but more importantly, how you've gone about it. You make us a people business, through and through. You really do. I've always thought we were good at well-being within conveyancing, and there's a genuine interest at every level of the business to make sure that people are okay, that people are well. But I've seen more of this in the last year than ever. I've seen more conversations, more one-to-ones, more WhatsApp groups, more emphasis on mental and physical well-being, the Fitness February initiative, exercise bikes being won, yoga sessions, just people caring about the person next to them. And that really has shone through in lockdown, and I'm sure will continue. I've also seen a laser focus on our numbers. And let's face it, that has to be key to our success as a business, even more so in these trying times. The capturing, tracking, and the analysis of how we perform is front and centre more than ever before. And I want to thank Sarah, Esther, and Warren, and all of you for driving that through. So as we're talking numbers, let's just look at our numbers and how we are doing. As expected, exchanges dropped last year. That's no surprise. From the end of March, when lockdown hit, the market just paused. No one knew what was going to happen. And the following months were the lowest we have ever had on record. 300 exchanges in April versus 1,300 the previous year. 600 exchanges in May versus 1,600 the year before. And we all know about the delays and the backlogs with lenders and councils and searches and other lawyers and surveyors, the list goes on. And then came the unprecedented demand from our customers taking advantage of the stamp duty break. And that made for the most difficult trading period in our history. And I know it also made for the most pressurised and stressful time of all of our working lives. So to still do over 20,000 exchanges for the year, only a few thousand behind our 2018 performance, is a credit to you. It really is. Thank you. And whilst our gross income was obviously down as a result of fewer exchanges and completions, we took tight control of costs. And as a responsible business, we reduced costs through furloughing, through a small restructure. But that doesn't really show the picture for me. The real picture is the build back month on month versus the previous year's performance. Despite all the challenges that you've managed to cope with for this business, you delivered a consistent Q4 at over 1,500 exchanges in October, November and December. That's no mean feat. And then if you compare that to Q1 this year, which is the red line, you really start to see the impact you're now having on our business. The trajectory is quite astonishing. Over 30% up on last year's exchanges in February, and that was before lockdown. 50% up in March versus March 2019. It really is fantastic. when you overlay those results against the last sort of normal year, which was 2019, which is the grey line, it continues to look even better. And all of the signs are that this will just continue throughout this year, thanks to the stamp duty phasing. And our branch colleagues continue to give us amazing support with record number of instructions. So if any of you are watching from our branch network, thank you for your support. It's been unwavering. And all, and all of those blockages across the industry seem to have cleared. Therefore, the exchanges by centre that are shown here are looking extremely strong across every single centre we have. Everybody is playing their part. And this is underpinned by market-leading NPS service scores. 59 for 2020 and 56 in this year to date already, which are a cracking result. We have to get over 60 for the year, but there's no reason why you won't do that. So from me, just thank you for looking after your customers so well. And as you can see from the graphs, Country and Capital, they've had some of their best months ever recently. So let's go over to Cath to find out a bit more about our London centre.
Thank you, Darren. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cath Perry, Managing Director of Country and Capital Property Law. I spoke with you at our last conference when I introduced to you Country and Capital Property Law. Little did we know where we were heading, both as a country and a business, some 8 weeks later. When we entered our first national lockdown, I think we panicked. Nobody really knew what was going to happen to the property market. I furloughed the majority of my team, which in hindsight probably wasn't the right decision to make, but quite frankly, nobody knew what was going to happen to the property market. I think it was a really tough time, regardless if you were on furlough or whether you remained in the business. The fact that the business made some really harsh and cautious decisions, not only did we preserve our brilliant business, but it also meant that for Country and Capital, we came out of 2020 with it being our most profitable year since trade had started in Beaconsfield in 2016. So let's look at some of our highlights of 2020. 2020 has seen the most exchanges for our business and the most completions. And despite the restrictions and transactions being protracted because of the pandemic, we finished the year with a pretty impressive NPS score of plus 65. We assisted our group colleagues on converting and completing a pipeline value of over £500 million, with majority of the transactions being high net worth and some with an international dimension. So we know that our proposition works. We know that there are some clients who want a more personalised and bespoke service. And we know that we can deliver that in an informal and friendly atmosphere. We have the benefit of offering the services of a small boutique firm whilst being supported by the larger conveyancing business, such as the sales team in Manchester, client accounting and financing, the compliance team, and the customer experience team, to name a few. So what's our future strategy? For Country and Capital, the key objective for this year and going into 2022 is growth. We've doubled in size in Beaconsfield since trade had started in 2016. And whilst we'll never be as big as Cardiff and Manchester, there is still plenty of opportunity with our group colleagues for the proposition that we offer. The majority of our work in Beaconsfield is from our country agents. So areas such as Buckinghamshire, Surrey, and the home counties. We currently receive very little work from London. Therefore, this year we plan to exploit the London market by opening an office in Pimlico, central London. The premises we have secured is in a prime location, which will attract high net worth central London work. The office will service Hamptons, John D. Wood and Capital Private Finance in London. And the plan is to start with 2 solicitors who will be supported by 2 executives and an admin person, like we did in Beaconsfield, and then we'll then grow from there. There's also plenty of opportunity in the premises for further growth in the future. So it's been quite a busy few years with the rebranding, establishing and promoting of Country and Capital Property Law. And we have a few busy years ahead of us, which following the Connells acquisition and being supported by the wider conveyancing business can only be a positive. Thank you ever so much for listening to my update, and we're going to pass back now to Darren.
Thanks, Cath. Some really great numbers there. And wow, exciting times for Country and Capital, and good luck with the new Pimlico centre opening and just growing that business further. It's just brilliant to hear and see. Right, so that's enough from me. I'm going to hand back to Alice now, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for working so hard against all of the odds, producing some cracking results last year, but especially this year so far. This is an exciting time for our business. This is going to be, at last, our year and our time. Thank you.
Many thanks, Darren and Catherine. Next up, and here to give us the view from the wider group, joining us remotely, please welcome MD for Conveyancing and Surveying, Paul Wareham.
Thank you, Alice. Great to be joining you this afternoon. I join you from the study of my new home. I moved in last week, and so I can apologise for the curtains behind me. They're not mine. They were here when I moved in, and I didn't pay for them, which I know you'll be very pleased about. But I'm going to talk to you about three things today. One is the recent Connells transaction and life with new owners. Two is our IT and where we are with that. And three, a little bit about COVID towards the end. So as this is being recorded, it's 2 weeks since the Connells transaction went through. And I thought you'd be very interested just to hear kind of the lie of the land, really, and in terms of what's happening and how things are playing out, I suppose. So what I can kind of share with you really, this is my kind of personal perception, is that Connells are very direct. They have very flat structures, so not a lot of hierarchy and not much, not many levels between what we see at the coalface and the senior exec team, and they make decisions really quickly. So an example of that, we did a change that went through late last year, involving fee changes. Now, that change took 18 months to get through, to get the necessary resource in IT and to make it happen across our suppliers as well, to kind of get a fairly simple change in. And that costs us £1 million. That delay of 18 months costs us about £1 million in terms of lost revenue. And we're in the Connells world now. So first thing we started looking at is kind of how we could capitalise on the strength of the panel arrangements that are held between the two organisations. And we're already making changes. So 2 weeks in, and we're already kind of doing things to make a difference to our world and make a better world for us for the future. I know David Livesey is on after me in terms of the conference. He's our new CEO. He's totally engaged with us as a business. He's already been in touch with me. I speak to him at least once a day now. So that intensity is kind of building as the transaction goes through. He's also in touch with Darren and really interested to kind of see how our conveyancing business works. A couple of other names that you'll need to kind of be aware of: Jeremy Davey, who looks after the kind of whole of the conveyancing operation within Connells, and Jamie Cullen as well, who's the Managing Director of Conveyancing Direct. So there's just two names that will be around our business. They'll be kind of looking and seeing how we do things as we'll be looking to see how they do things. So just for awareness. One of the things I've really picked up is in our old world in Countrywide, we loved a meeting. We loved being in a meeting. We loved that interaction and kind of talking to people. And I think Connells don't. Connells don't like a meeting. They don't like certainly long meetings. So I've given my leadership team, I've given us a challenge to kind of really look at where we're in a meeting and we're just telling each other what we already know. So it might be the number of exchanges we did last week, or it might be how much revenue we wrote in February, or whatever it is. If we're telling ourselves what we already know, we should challenge each other to ask whether we really need that meeting, and can we take it out and spend more time in the operation rather than in a meeting talking about what we already know. So simple challenge, that's out there already, and trying to get us from a place where we love a meeting to getting ourselves to a place where we love a meeting as long as it's short and relevant. And I think we're on with that already. So changes are afoot. In terms of, just to give you a sense of scale, the new kind of combined operation between Connells and Countrywide will control about 80,000 exchanges a year. And just to kind of compare that to where we were, Conveyancing in Countrywide will do around about 22,000 exchanges this year. Conveyancing direct in Connells about 3.5 exchanges. So we're not even anywhere near halfway to the total volume that is controlled by the new organisation. It's a massive opportunity. So really, to reach our potential, we'd need to kind of grow and grow and grow. That so the opportunity is there to really do something special. We need to make some investment. I'll come on to that in a bit, but actually our future looks very bright. It looks very secure. Some people will be asked to do a different role than they do at the moment, but ultimately we are building, we are growing, we're going to be a bigger, better business. And that's good in terms of the longevity, the security and the stability for our people. So all good news. Part of the transaction that, as part of the transaction, Connells committed to invest in the NOAA programme, which is our transition of IT from one platform to another. I'm pleased to say that within Conveyancing, that's going to be delivered in July of this year. Now, I know there have been 100 false starts in IT, and crikey, since I identified it back in 2016 that we needed to invest in IT, we spent very little and not a lot has happened. But now I can absolutely categorically say we're in plan for July. It is going to happen. Hats off to both Helen Stead and Kelly Rolfe that have kept that date sacrosanct in the IT diary. They've campaigned for it, and we're going to get over the line. We're going to get over the line in July, and that will give us speed and stability. Now, those two things that I think most people would take for granted when they switch on their PC in the morning. But I know in Conveyancing we've had absolutely the worst experience in IT within the Countrywide group. So to bring us to a place where you can go in the morning, you can switch on your PC, you're not met with a spinning wheel or an inability to sign on or a document that takes kind of 2 minutes plus to load. We will get a normal IT experience. And that, for me, is transformational for our business because we are so hampered, so handicapped by what we have at the moment. So moving from a position of handicap to a position of normality is actually transitional, and it's massive for our business. I think step one is that kind of speed and stability as taken for granted. That's just going to happen. Step two is where we go with our work process and kind of how much do we need to invest to kind of move our work processes into a place where we have all the automation and all the integration that really is the next step. Is a slick operating platform with a slick work process. Now, those conversations have already started in terms of building on that, and we will, campaign really, because if we have to become a bigger and better business, but just to cope with the available transactions. So to do that, we have to invest in our IT and our IT infrastructure, and specifically our work processes. So those conversations are happening, and I'll keep you up to date kind of how that looks in the future. As I sit here today, it's a year since we went into lockdown. It's actually the anniversary today, and that's kind of caused me a lot of reflection in terms of where we are and how we got here. It's been tough, hasn't it? It's been really tough on everyone. I think everyone has been impacted in some way, shape or form, whether that's childcare, through furlough, parents, whatever it is. It's been really, really tough year to kind of navigate. And I know some people have struggled through it, and I know some people are still struggling. So I just wanted to kind of really say, look, help is at hand, whether it's formally. We've got a number of trained people now in all of our offices, Manchester, Cardiff, Beaconsfield, to help you formally with anything you're struggling with. And informally, whether it's me, whether it's your neighbour, whether it's your colleague, it doesn't matter, but please kind of reach out and please talk about anything you're struggling with, and help is there. Help is there. You will be listened to, and help will be given. So just a bit of reassurance, really, that I know this isn't over for right now, and it's certainly not over in terms of any struggle that anyone might be facing. So please reach out, talk, and help is there. Just finally, in such an incredible, unique year, I just wanted to thank you. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your resilience. I'm really proud of how we've got through the year. It's been tough. We've done it together. We've kind of navigated things I hope we never, ever see again in my lifetime or anybody's lifetime. But we've done it well, and we've held principles of looking after each other, supporting each other at heart. We've kept our customers kind of very happy, and you just look at the recovery of our NPS scores and things like that that have really started to recover well back to pre kind of pandemic levels, which is just a fantastic piece given all the disruption we had last year. So thank you. Thanks for what you do. I really appreciate it, and I'm really proud of everything that we do together. Thank you, and goodbye.
Thank you, Paul. It's reassuring to hear of the technology upgrades and, of course, the many business opportunities that lie ahead for conveyancing. Next, to tell us a little bit more about these opportunities and the future, please welcome Group CEO David Livesey.
Hello, I'm David Livesey, and thank you to Paul for inviting me to your conveyancing conference today. I love conveyancing. It sits right at the centre of things in the Connells Group, and the two businesses are similar but different in many respects in the conveyancing area. So I'll try and give you some of those similarities and differences. So one of the things that's exactly the same for both the businesses is that for every house that we sell through the estate agency, there is a 300% plus opportunity to sell conveyancing. One to the buyer, one to the seller, and each of them may have an onward purchase or sale. In terms of the difference, Connells are converting at a rate of about one conveyance for each house sale. So let's say 100% conversion rate. Still way below where it could be, but it's about 1 for 1 with the house sales. In Countrywide, that same number is about 0.6. So just by normalising the 0.6, before we even sell any more houses, to about 1 conveyance per house sale, we will have generated literally thousands more conveyancing matters. So here's another similarity and another difference. In Countrywide and Connells, both businesses own a conveyancing company or companies and also use a panel. Here's the difference. In Countrywide, about 20% of the work is panelled out, the rest is kept in-house. In Connells Group, about 90% of the work is panelled out. So very different in terms of the relative proportions. And just to stay on that point, in the area of panelling, the margin that's been made is very different in Connells because its business model is built around panelling. So there's about £400 per case additional margin to be made on the work that's panelled out. If we're successful in selling more houses and we're successful in improving the attachment rate, therefore we get the double whammy of a much bigger number of conveyancing instructions, more will have to be panelled out and at that much higher margin. Put all that together, what's the size of the prize? Our current guesswork is at least £10 million of additional profit. So this is really important to us at group level. Both businesses have been deeply involved in the success story of the TM Group for local authority searches, and combined we now own 66% of that business, and I think there's really good news to come out of TM. The Connells Group also own a 50% stake in LMS based in Chester, who panel manage remortgage conveyancing and have this proposition called Panel Link, where they oversee the panel of transactional conveyancing firms used by the lenders. Another really successful business there that comes into this whole kind of universe of conveyancing and related services that we now bring together. And now stepping back from conveyancing, overall, there are two businesses here who are very similar. Culturally, hardly any difference. There's lots of people in Countrywide who used to work in Connells and vice versa. Very similar sales-focused culture, the same multi-branding on the estate agency side, similar mortgage propositions, similar conveyancing propositions. There are differences around the edges, like mortgage networks and commercial estate agency in LSH, but overall, two very similar groups and very similar mindsets and approaches to business. The one thing that we have been able to change very quickly is to remove the shackle of all of the old PLC stuff that was bogging Countrywide down. All of the external debt has gone. We don't have to talk to the city and to analysts. We can now just focus on doing the things that we're good at. And as we move forward, you'll see a very like-minded group of people working together, people who treat others as they would like to be treated themselves, people who are going that extra mile for the company, knowing that the company will do the same for them, people who are focused on bottom line sanity, pre-tax profit, not top line vanity of revenue or EBITDA or all those different measures. And profit is important because it's not about the profit per se. Profit is just a good measure of success. It's a broad brush measure of how well we're doing. If we've got the right people, the best people in the profession, doing the right things and delivering a great service to our customers, then obviously we'll make profit. And so it's a good measure of how we're doing in lots of different respects. People who will use mantras like, if I can't measure it, I can't manage it. It doesn't matter who was right as long as we got it right. Those are all the things that I think you will see coming together as a recipe for the success of this integration. Now finally, I'm often asked, what does success look like? And part of the answer to that is improved trading. And we already do have significantly improved trading because the market is so helpful to us at the moment, which is great. But improved trading in all of those metrics, and I've touched on some of them already, we'll start to see those metrics improving as we focus on ploughing our furrow as a business, undistracted by debt and city and share price and all of those things. Now, unfortunately, because of the COVID restrictions, I can't meet you in person, but I do intend to, and I will be visiting Manchester and Cardiff as soon as I can. But in the meantime, my email address is at the bottom. If you've got any questions, observations, please drop me a note. I'm very responsive on emails and I'm keen to understand what's happening in the business. So don't be shy, drop me an email, and thanks very much for having me along today. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Exciting market conditions and ambitious plans. The importance of relationships and driving market share are just two areas that are brought into sharp focus in our next session. Here to share his perspectives, please welcome Divisional Managing Director for the South, Toby Phillips, interviewed here by Associate Director Sarah Lloyd.
Thank you, Alice. Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here today, joined by one of the most senior colleagues in sales and lettings. I'm pleased to be with Toby Phillips, who is the Regional Managing Director for Sales and Lettings for the South. Toby, welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Good afternoon. And great to be here. Great to be part of it. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Well, Toby, would you mind if we start just by telling us a little bit about you and your career with Countrywide?
Of course, no problems at all. So, Sarah, I've been in this agency now just over 30 years. I joined Countrywide, or Hambros, as it was known then, in 1988. Originally, I was part of the Man & Co brand, which we refer to now as Man Countrywide. So I'm definitely starting to show my age now. I've worked through each level. So I've worked from negotiator, branch manager, regional and so forth throughout my career. So from the ground level up. I actually rejoined Countrywide 9 years ago. So after running my own business and then spending a few years working for the Sequence Group, rejoined Countrywide. I became the divisional managing director 3 years ago, having worked my way across the south, incorporating pretty much every role, every territory and region. And actually, probably news for you, I've probably paid lots of fees to CCS because I've moved house about 7 times in that juncture, from Devon all the way to the Isle of Wight, and incorporating many moves in there. So, but my relationship with CCS goes quite a long way back, actually. So it actually goes back to the start. We were known then as CPL, Countrywide Property Lawyers, for those out there who are a bit younger than me. We were based in Woking, and I was there on day one as the branch manager of Newbury office. And all of our leasehold work was done by EDC Lloyd, who were our partner back then. And it was very, very new. So I'm certainly now, by the end of this, really showing my age, Sarah. So that's how it's been over the last 30 years.
So clearly, Toby, you've got such a wealth of experience of working alongside us at CCS. What would you say has changed during that time?
So much, Sarah, has changed. Probably the two that spring to mind straight away is you've stopped charging us to come into your country. So no toll charges has been the biggest change, and definitely has amounted to more business without a shadow of a doubt. Also, Pete Jardine, very happy that we're now not in Bridgend because he's seen less car claims now we've been in Cardiff. So no disrespect to Cath Perry, she's listening. But in all seriousness, joking aside, Sarah, for me, it's relationships. The biggest change we've seen has been top to bottom. We're no longer 2 businesses, we're no longer 2 departments, and that's come from the top all the way through the organisation, and that's been the most important change we've seen. I do feel really qualified to say to you how well our service has gone up, both internally from an internal customer's point of view and an external customer's point of view. And obviously, if you just look at our growth in our NPS and the amount of awards we've won that have been voted for by customers, you can see the change really now taking place and how far that's grown over the last few years. But the part in any business that you'd expect to change is the people. And this has probably fundamentally been one hell of a change for us within your team, Sarah, working with you, the likes of Gavin, the likes of Sean, and that conduit that is Gemma that links 2 businesses into one as that key account manager. And I'd say that the biggest thing in those guys is the skill level, the commitment level, and the passion that they have within the Cardiff Centre has fundamentally been the biggest change on a daily basis, Sarah. So really, relationships have been the biggest thing that I would talk about today with you.
Fantastic. It's so great to hear that, because I know that we do work so closely together, more so than ever. So thank you. It's really, really pleasing to hear that. And obviously at CCS, we're really quite lucky because we don't have to go out and win any business for ourselves, because predominantly the work that feeds to us in our centres comes from your branches. Having said that, it's not a given, is it, that work comes to us?
No, it's not.
What are the key benefits that your branches see in referring their work to us at CCS?
You know, that's a great question, actually, because had you have asked me that question a few years ago, I would have probably read from the pamphlet about no sale, no fee, 7 days a week, and I'd have listed you all the features and benefits that you'd wanted. But interestingly, I think you can sum that up in one word, which will answer real 3 key benefits. It's all about control, Sarah. CCS gives us control. It gives us control for the customer, control for us in the branches, but it also gives us control of our income. The biggest reason for us to use and keep providing more and more work to CCS is in what is at such an uncertain world at the best of times, that control factor is absolutely key. And that is the biggest part and the biggest benefit for us of keeping everything within in-house.
Fantastic. And that's great news for us, because clearly we want as much of your work with us.
Absolutely.
And is that what makes us better than a high street lawyer, or Is there anything else?
Well, I think, Sarah, there's so many differences, but I think the best example I can give you is if you could name me a high street lawyer that I can sit down with every month, every week, and every day at times, and go through the customers that are looking to move in that week that we have to give priority to, then actually we wouldn't be having this conversation. There aren't any. So actually, there's so many standout things, but just that one in isolation. And if you look at the marketplace we're in now, with stamp duty and all the deadlines we've got, that is unheard of. That is imperative. And the high street don't offer it. So it's really plain and simple. Just that one factor alone is head and shoulders.
And clearly in the coming months, that's going to be incredibly important as we do move towards the dreaded stamp duty deadlines. There's no getting away from that, is there? So is there anything that you think CCS could do better to support your branches? Is there anything perhaps that other lawyers do that we don't do?
Really interesting, Sarah, because I think that question is two-sided. There's something actually, it's not for the centre, but it's actually for the overall business. So if I look at what we can do and what we should be doing now, the first part I would say is our vendors. This is where we've got huge improvement. We've got improvement from the time we sign the agency agreement in the front room, or in these days, probably virtually. But when we sign that agency agreement, these clients have to be treated as VIPs. And I think we can do a much better job with the vendors from day one, before there's even a mention of a buyer, before there's even a mention of them going sale subject to contract. If we can jumpstart our vendors so they've got a really unique position, that is so powerful. Number one, as a selling tool. Number two, to encourage the branches, but also it really stands out from the crowd that if you come on with Countrywide, use CCS, you'll be that much further ahead. So for me, we are doing a lot of work on this at the moment, as you know. So we are looking at our fast start proposition, because there are bags and bags of room for improvement on there, which will just take this business further forward. But it is two-sided for me, because it's all about, you ask the question what you can change, but actually it's actually fundamentally what we can all change. And I think from my point of view, if I look at how we're selling the product, CCS as a product on the instruction, we can get better. We can cement the client's understanding of just how important it is to use conveyancing from day one. And actually, the biggest part for me is if we're doing that job on instruction and not as the transaction flows down, every single client they're selling their biggest asset, Sarah. Why would you not give your asset to one joined up pair of hands? Why would you run the risk of sending out to 3 or 4 separate pairs of hands that seldomly talk and actually don't really have anything to do with each other? So actually the concept, we can get better at selling it in the front room. I think the other part, Sarah, that we've really looking at now with a number of the brands across the UK is that house price isn't an issue. That's not an obstacle as to why someone won't use CCS or support CCS. For me, the clients at this end of the spectrum actually do need our service more with how busy their lives are and how busy time is. So actually, the two things we can do is actually we can drive a greater engagement and a greater attachment through every branch, regardless of what marketplace or price point we're operating in. So speed of value for our vendors, but also there's more that we can be doing in the branch network.
Thank you, Toby. And you'll be pleased to know that that front end is something that we really are focusing on at the moment, just to see how we can become more efficient. And let's just say, treat that client as a VIP from a little bit earlier on. So really pleased you mentioned that, actually, because it's something that is certainly on our minds. And it's great to hear that, there is more that we can do for you, because we're always trying to improve. But do you think there's anything else that perhaps branches could do to support CCS?
For me, the fundamental part of this is once we've got the vendor signed, it's how the most precious instruction or activation, should I say, comes from our purchasers. They're the people actually who will instruct us straight away, and we can start working with straight away. So that really, from the day one of the applicant registering all the way through the viewing, is us in the branches can use those trigger points far more effectively to drip in Countrywide conveyancing from applicant registration and not leaving it to the client's got an offer and got loads of other things on their mind. So actually, purchaser penetration is an attachment that we can really focus on, but far earlier in the relationship with the buyer. And that's one big drive that we're having across all of the regions at the moment.
Great. And just talking there about, instructions for us. We've talked earlier today about the Connells takeover. Has there been, or do you see any changes to estate agency as a result of that takeover? Or do you think there'll be any changes to the work that comes through to us at CCS?
Really simply, Sarah, yes. I can see lots of positive changes. And the way I'd really explain it today, and to yourself and everyone out there, is that the Connells Group coming in will help us drive market share. So we will drive more instructions into our branches. Quite simply, more instructions, we sell more houses, and we will have more CCS opportunities. So it's a really simple dynamic. Fantastic news, as David Livesey was explaining earlier. But fundamentally, what it means for you and I is we have more work because we have more properties on the market. And that's the big drive. And I think the message that I would say to everybody in the centres and all of my team is, if you look at the market we're in at the moment, coupled with what I've just said, there's only going to be one result, and we are going to be extremely busy. It's going to be a very busy time ahead, Sarah.
I'm really pleased to hear that. And Toby, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been great to chat to you. And I really look forward to our continued success together in what, as you've said, will be a very busy few months ahead, and probably years, actually. So thank you for your time.
Very much so. My pleasure. And thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Back to you in the studio now, Alice.
Thank you, Sarah and Toby. Some helpful reminders of how working collaboratively is imperative to happy customers and driving market share. Changing tack just a little, here to share two historical stories using two very intriguing objects. Please welcome Legal and Compliance Director Alison Roberts.
Hello, it's really lovely to be talking to you again. Last year, if you were at the conference in Birmingham, you may remember that I told you stories about 4 everyday objects that were associated in some way with the law. And I got some really nice feedback on my TripAdvisor, so thank you very much for that. That was lovely. And so I've decided to pick up where I left off and tell you 2 more stories that have got a loose association with the law. And just remember, like I said last year, don't overthink it. It's not connected with the rest of the conference, and there are no hidden depths. The stories I've chosen this year are a coin and a chauffeur's hat. And I want to tell you the first story about a coin. In our country, we have an expression, the king is dead, long live the king. This means simply that when the king or queen dies, their successor becomes sovereign at the moment of death without the need for legislation. They are supposed to die in harness. And that's why there's no legal mechanism for a sovereign to step down or to retire. Therefore, in 1936, when Edward VIII wanted to abdicate, Parliament had to pass a special law to allow this to happen. And on the 11th of December, 1936, the Act of Abdication became law. Edward VIII had been a very popular Prince of Wales, keen on social reform, unstuffy, and an early adopter of American films, cocktails and jazz. He was good-looking, a trendsetter, and was very proud of his left side hair parting at a time when men of his age and class wore their hair slicked back. He fell in love with Wallis Simpson, a twice-divorced American woman with 2 husbands still living, and was forced to choose between her and the throne. Famously, he chose love over duty, signed the Act of Abdication, and in December 1936 left England forever. Carol singers that year sang, "Hark the Herald Angels Sing, Mrs. Simpson's pinched our king." At the time, people were divided between supporters who saw this as a great romantic love story and those who disapproved of his weakness in putting personal happiness before public service. In the years since the abdication, much has been revealed about his character. His admiration for Hitler, for example. There's a famous photograph of him of Mrs. Simpson shaking hands with the Führer. Well, it was 1937 and we were not then at war, but in 1940 when we were and an invasion was daily expected, he was living safely in the south of France. From there, he sent a personal request to the Nazi hierarchy to protect his Parisian flat crammed with jewels, silver and fine art for the many looters in occupied Paris. Delighted with this PR, they were only too pleased to oblige. The stories that later emerged about his meanness, disloyalty and arrogance abound. But even at the time, there was a clue to his character, and it's all to do with this simple coin. Before I tell you that, though, let me just take you back 276 years. We've had coins in this country since before the Roman invasion, and they've always contained an image of the sovereign. Even after 1649, when Charles I had been executed after losing the Civil War, Oliver Cromwell was represented on the coinage as Lord Protector. Cromwell and the rise of the Puritan party demonstrated the truth of that old adage, be careful what you wish for. Because Cromwell and his Puritans passed a law banning Christmas celebrations. They banned mince pies and carol singing. They banned the theatre and public entertainments. They were against feasting, drinking and having fun. And, like all Puritans, they were against fornication wherever they found it. And also, like most Puritans, they would often go a long way to find it, just to refresh their sense of outrage. And that doesn't really sit very well with the English and the Welsh, who like a drink and a laugh and don't take themselves too seriously. And as soon as Cromwell died, we invited Charles's son, waiting in exile in France, to come back and be king. The monarchy was restored in 1660 and theatres opened again, all those restoration comedies. Charles II proves to be the opposite of a Puritan. He loved feasting, Christmas, drinking and having fun. He wasn't called the Merry Monarch for nothing. And he was an exceptional fornicator. He had no legitimate children of his own, but half the British aristocracy is descended from one or other of his extramarital liaisons, including the Duchess of Cornwall. I'm sure she won't mind me telling you that. In fact, Camilla's great-great-granny on the other side of her family was Alice Keppel, Edward VII's last and favourite mistress, so she has very jolly blood running through her veins. I expect she makes those dull winter evenings at Sandringham just fly by. Anyway, in between the feasting, the fun and the fornication, and frankly, one wonders where he found the time, Charles II also started a curious little tradition that's with us still today. He decreed that when his coins were first struck, he was going to turn right, and his successor should turn left, and the next to turn right, and so on. There was no known reason for it, but that's exactly what happened for the next 267 years. These are coins from every reign, from Charles II to George V. Some of them, they're quite old, they might be quite difficult to see, but they're all turning right and left alternatively. Charles II, right, James II, left, William and Mary, right, Anne left, George's 1 to 4, right and left in turn, William IV, right, Victoria left, Edward VII, right, George V, left. And so we come to the year of my story, 1936. George V died in January, and Edward VIII became king. His coins were struck by the Royal Mint, showing him turning right, and sent to him from approval. But Edward VIII refused to accept them, saying, "I'm much more handsome on my left side. My nose is straighter, and I want people to see my left-hand hair parting." So he sent them back and demanded a left-profile coin. His courtiers were appalled at such shallow and vain behaviour, and said, "But your Majesty, you can't, left, right, 267 years. But Edward VIII didn't care about tradition, and because it wasn't a law, his coins were struck, showing him turning left like his father. To complete the story, when his brother George VI became king in December 1936, he faced a dilemma. Should he turn right because his brother had turned left, or should he turn left as history and tradition demanded? I know what you're thinking. It's the very essence of a first world problem, and you're right. But he took it seriously, and he came up with what I think is a very British solution. He said, "My brother should have been turning right, and I'm going to act as though he'd done the right thing, and I will be turning left." So there we have 1936, 3 kings, and they're all turning left. So unique is this situation that in 2019, an Edward VIII sovereign coin became the first British coin to be bought for £1 million. It has a face value of £1, but it's currently the country's most valuable coin. Just to bring the story right up to date, here's the Queen, turning right, of course. You just can't imagine her saying, "No, I think my hair looks better this way." And when Prince Charles comes to the throne as Charles III, if we still have coins, then look in your pocket and see that he will be turning left. And now, I'd like to tell you my second story. This is a chauffeur's cap, and it is loosely connected with the law. And I suppose a chauffeur's cap isn't an everyday object, but just indulge me. This is an object about the law, but it's about the law of relativity, so I am cheating slightly. Everybody will know this iconic picture of Einstein. And personally, I never look at it now without thinking, A, lockdown hair, and B, IQ of 160, and no better than the rest of us at cracking the smart casual dress code. Even in his own day, although not many people knew what he looked like, no TV or internet, he was extremely famous and everybody had heard of the great Professor Einstein. He did his seminal work in 1905, and E equals mc squared, the world's most famous equation, explained how energy could be released in stars and nuclear explosions, and it abolished established notions of space and time. And don't worry, knowing that already makes you overqualified to listen to my story. The theory of relativity had made Einstein famous, and of the many attractive offers he had, he chose a tour of American universities where he would deliver the same lecture on his famous equation. He was given a car and a chauffeur to drive it, and the chauffeur's job was to drive into the venue, set up his podium, sit at the back until he'd finished it, pack everything away, and drive him to the hotel at night. And one day, after Einstein had delivered the lecture many times, the chauffeur said to him, "You know, Professor, you always say exactly the same thing. I could deliver the lecture myself, but I still have no idea what any of it means." And Einstein, who was clearly more up for a laugh than this picture might suggest, said, "Why don't you do it then?" So the two of them had a practice, chose a venue, and on the day Einstein dressed in the chauffeur's cap and jacket, and the chauffeur, well, history doesn't record what the chauffeur wore to achieve this particular look, but I think we can all agree that on that day, he was a stranger both to the hairbrush and to the iron. The plan worked perfectly, except for one thing. When you're nervous, you tend to speak a little faster than usual, and the chauffeur finished the lecture with time to spare. The master of ceremonies, after delivering his thanks, said, "We appear to have a few minutes in hand. Is there anyone here who would like to ask Professor Einstein a question?" Now that had never happened before. The chauffeur looked out at the sea of expectant faces and thought, "Please don't ask a question. Please nobody ask a question." But of course the place was packed with clever members of the public and eager students, all dying to show off to the great Professor Einstein. And a forest of hands shot up. "Pick me," said the hands. And the MC picked a second-year student who asked a question of such erudition and complexity that the chauffeur's eyes watered and he understood only two words, "the" and "and." But he was a clever and resourceful fellow, and he said, "Second-year physics student, I'm surprised you don't know the answer to that question. I should have thought it was obvious even to members of the public here. In fact, it's so obvious, I'm going to ask my chauffeur, who's sitting at the back of the room, to come up here and explain it to you." And that is exactly what he did. And that ends for this year my two stories connected with the law. I hope you enjoyed them, and I'll see you next year.
Thank you, Alison. Another set of captivating stories inspired by two simple objects. Next up, we have our Q&A session. Sadly, Einstein won't be joining us, but we do have an impressive panel nevertheless. Esther Fawke, Head of Panel and Support Operations, will be putting your questions to the senior leadership team. Darren Hall, Warren Martin, Sarah Lloyd and Alison Roberts.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the session so far today. Welcome to our Q&A. Here I'm joined by Alison, Darren, Warren and Sarah. Say hello, everybody.
Hello.
It's nice and enthusiastic. Thank you. We've had some great questions for the Q&A today. We're going to cover all sorts. IT, the ID process, flexibility around working from home, training and development, and of course, capacity. So without further ado, I'm going to turn to my first question. And it is around ID. And how can we make the process more streamlined? How can we make it better for our colleagues and for us? Who wants to take the first question?
Esther, are you okay? Shall I take that one?
Great. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, Esther, I'd love to move away from our existing partly electronic, partly manual ID checks because it's resource hungry. And let's face it, we're not fraud or handwriting experts. We've always got to balance risk in our business against promoting a smooth customer journey. And we're in the business where the majority of our risk comes from probably fewer than 20% of our customers. And what we don't want is for the other 80% to have to jump through unnecessary hoops. So at the minute, we're quite excited because we're working with LexisNexis to help them develop their biometric app, which we hope will be more secure, efficient, and for our customers, a much more convenient way to identify them. And some of it will be quite familiar to you, which is great news, because you just log into the IDU system as normal, input your customer's details, and that generates a text message to them to use the app. Client then takes a selfie photo, they blink to show that they're actually a living image, and then they take a picture of 2 acceptable forms of ID, 1 signature and 1 proof of address. Then in the background, LexisNexis and their partners carry out the checks, including the biometric check, and then the result comes to us in a way, again, that we're very familiar with, which is passed, failed, or referred. So we're hoping it should work well to ID the majority of our customers, which means that we can devote our resource to managing those exceptions, like the referred or the failed cases, those clients living outside the EU, which are always our highest risk cases, and those where customers may not have a smartphone, such as those in nursing homes. So I'm really excited that we can be part of that. And the beauty of it is that it sits quite outside our IT system. So we don't need development and we don't need IT help for that. So I think that's going to be a great step forward for us this year.
I think it's brilliant. The thought of biometrics and CCS is quite exciting. So I can't wait to hear, where we go next in relation to that. Okay, question around capacity. How do we safeguard against an ever-growing pipeline? And how will we effectively manage capacity? Who wants to take this one? Stunned silence.
Shall I take that one, as there's been no rush to take it? Thanks, Esther. It's a good question, and one that it's fair to say I've had quite a lot over recent weeks and months. And ever-growing pipeline is an interesting one, actually, because it certainly feels that way. But where we are today with our level of cases compared to where we entered the year, how we started 2021, is only 50 cases different. So it certainly doesn't feel like that at the moment. And we've had a high lot of instructions over the last few weeks. And really, that's a testament to the teams. The strong exchanges that the centres have done over recent weeks has really balanced that out and allowed us to manage at a better capacity with strong exchanges. So thank you, everybody, for that. But we knew the stamp duty extension, was coming. We now have the 2 deadlines, and with the 5% deposit scheme, which is now in, it was a real shot in the arm for the housing market. So it's fair to say that the volume is not unique to CCS. We're feeling that across the piece. We're seeing it from other lawyers with auto responses of firms experiencing high levels of volumes, delays in coming back to us, and some lethargy in the market, really. So because it's across the whole piece, that includes our panel firms. With that including our panel firms, that's our release valve for capacity and where we relieve some pressure in the centres. We use that every summer without fail. And because it's across the whole piece, they too are feeling the similar challenges. So I know that you, Esther, are reaching out to a number of firms to try and get them onto our panel to assist us with that over coming months. But as a single one thing that we can do, it's recruitment and bringing people on board to help us with these levels of business and to take on more staff. And we have been doing that. It's a lot more difficult to see when we're working remotely as it would be if you were in the centres. You would see and you'd tangibly notice the recruitment step change that we've had. We've hired 7 lawyers since the start of the year. I believe at last count it was 8 legal assistants. We've got some temps in on post-exchange, some more permanent staff, PC, Connect, all the support teams, which adding that up is 31 staff since the start of the year. So in just Q1 alone, we've added 31 staff to our team. So as I say, you won't necessarily see that or feel that remotely, but they are there, and there are more coming. We're looking to get around another 10 plus lawyers by the end of the year, and we will just continue to recruit with it. We also, as well as externally, have our own internal growth. We've got the training academies, which we are on our 10th now in Manchester, which itself is part of our growth, and we recognise capacity in week 5. We start to take sale files. So we'll continue to do that as well. And if there's another academy required, whether it be in Cardiff, Manchester, or more throughout the year, then we will do that. So I guess overall, whilst it might not feel like it right now, it's a good thing to have lots of business. We just need to get more people on board to help us with that, and that's what we'll do. And closing that out, anything to add to that really is that we've been part of the Connells Group now for around a month, which in itself offers some avenues and opportunities for instructions, including Connell's panel. So as the months go on, we'll have more doors open for us, more people join us, and it'll start to feel a little bit more like normal. But it's fair to say we're going to have a busy few months ahead of us, and we'll just continue to sort of pledge to bring the people in to help us with it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think it does, and there's several things there, and you're just pulling out sort of recruitment and the training academy. And I've got one other question here around training and development. And Sarah, I think I'll come to you if I may on this one. There's questions about, are there any more plans for development, like the training academy, paralegal training, and lawyer bandings?
Yeah, absolutely, Esther. And I think, we certainly didn't have the year last year that we were expecting when it comes to training. So we've got an awful lot planned for this year, which is actually really exciting. As Warren's already mentioned, we've already started an academy in Manchester so far this year, and we plan to launch another academy in Cardiff now in July, which will be a mix of both paralegals and trainee property lawyers. For those people that remember last year's conference, I also talked back then about us launching a property lawyer academy. So an academy for existing lawyers to move through the bandings from associate property lawyer to senior property lawyer in a much more structured and formal way than we've ever offered previously. And that is something that we're looking to launch imminently. One of the other roles that we're looking to develop this year is the legal assistants. And we're looking at what training is needed to allow our legal assistants to move through their bandings as well. It's safe to say this year we want to get back to where we were at the very start of last year, where we provided opportunities for every role to attend training every month. Obviously, we moved away from that last year, understandably, but we want to get back to that this year. And again, whilst we have delivered some training over the last few weeks, now we know when the stamp duty deadlines are, we can work around that to make sure that we're delivering as much training to as many people as possible. Joe Barnett's also working on a webinar library on SharePoint, where people can go and pick their own training if they need CPD points, or if there's a topic that they're struggling with, they can just take some ownership for their own training and have a look on that. And I think the final thing, Esther, is that over the last few years, we've supported a number of our colleagues through conveyancing apprenticeships, and that's something that we want to really continue to do. Particularly in Manchester, we've had a number of colleagues who have qualified as licensed conveyancers as a result of completing those apprenticeships, which is just fantastic news. And whilst we are moving away from Damar, our previous training provider, we've got a new training provider signed up, which is the Conveyancing Academy with Convey Law. And we've already got a number of people ready and waiting to start over the next few months. So I think, an awful lot to come from training this year, but there should be opportunities for everyone in every role.
Definitely. I mean, there's so many possibilities there for different roles, as you say. So it's quite exciting to see what's coming up this year. Definitely fun-packed and full in terms of possibilities for training. Great. So I'm going to move on to a very, very popular question. And somebody here is grinning like a Cheshire cat because they've got away with everything so far. So Darren, this is coming your way. It's a bit of a burning question as well. How do you see the business post-lockdown, and in particular around flexibility of working in the office or working from home?
Yeah, thanks, Esther. I did think I'd gotten away with it then, but yeah, it's a great question. We've been asked that a few times, and the understandable question. I think the landscape of the world's changed without a doubt. So in short, I do believe that there will be some form of home working available in our business going forward. That's probably the simplest answer I can give. Just to go into it a little bit more in detail, our basic business model is an office model, and it always has been. We work in teams, we have team roles, we pass work from one team to the other, from scanning to new business to connect, packs over to the client accounting team. So our infrastructure and our processes are built around that. We can't get away from that. So that's one thing. We are going to have to be office based to a degree. And I also don't underestimate the role that or the impact of well-being within our business, and the role of well-being within that office interaction in particular. Now more than ever, it's so critical that we're there to look after each other, to support each other. Just being there for one another day in, day out is just a critical part of our business going forward. And you cannot really replicate that outside the office environment. So they're two big reasons why we won't move to a full working from home solution. But as a general rule of thumb, we will have remote working, home working available. It will be role specific, because to be honest, if you're in scanning, you can't really scan the paper that comes in from home. So unfortunately, you're going to have to be office based. If you're a brand new starter, then our infrastructure doesn't lend itself to training effectively remotely. So you're going to be in the office, buddied up with someone on a team, learning about the business day in, day out. So it's going to be role specific. It's going to be performance based as well. So if you're struggling with certain tasks, then you're going to have to be in the office to get a bit of support, coaching, mentoring. But ultimately, that's a long way to answer, but the short answer is fundamentally we're an office-based business, but we will have remote working and home working available going forward. I think we cannot not have that going forward.
Great, and I know that there'll be a detailed roadmap coming out for everybody as well, so that would be really useful so everybody knows where they are with that. Thanks, Darren. I think it's fair to say we can't get through a Q&A without mentioning IT, and there will be certain things during the session that will have been mentioned around IT and infrastructure. Does anybody want to add anything more to that specifically for us in conveyancing?
Yeah, let me just add something there. I think we heard from Paul earlier on, just covering the IT roadmap and what changes are happening. But just some small things which could be quite big in our business. But we have confirmation that everybody in conveyancing will be given a brand new laptop, which will be docked at their desk. So you won't have the Wise terminals you work from now, or if you do work from a laptop, it will be replaced. You'll have a brand new Windows laptop which you can take home every night or leave in the office docked. So that's a big tick in the box for me because that's new kit on the desk. And you'll retain your monitors you've got now. So you could plug the laptop in and have a 1 monitor in the laptop screen, or 2 monitors on the desk and the laptop screen. So a 3 monitor setup, however you want to use it. But that's a bit of a tick in the box for me. We're also moving, when you get that new laptop and we're in the post CGI world, we're going to deploy Office 365. So that's the very latest version of Office Outlook, Word, Excel, etc. The very latest version. It will just be there on your system, and it's subscription service. So it means it will always stay on the latest version. As we know now, we're on Office 2010. We're 10 years, 11 years behind. This just always updates to the later version. So that could be quite a significant difference to our business. And then there's other additional changes. Every laptop will have Microsoft Teams, which is the video conferencing facility that Microsoft do. So your laptop will have a camera at the top, and whether you like video conferences or not, you'll be able to video conference to your boss, team members, to join calls with myself, the leadership team, or Paul. So again, that's a small step in the right direction. And then things like SharePoint. We'll be upgrading to the latest version of SharePoint. So I know a lot of people in client accounting hearing this will be going, yay, because it's an unsupported 15-year-old version you're on now. We'll be on the latest supported version, which just means it'll work slightly better, quicker, and if anything goes wrong, it'll be fixed a lot quicker. So just wanted to add those quick bits in for IT.
And I think we're definitely all looking forward to that, Darren. So it's, good times ahead from an IT front, we hope. Those were all the sort of business-related question, but we have had an extra question thrown in the mix just to wrap things up, which is around how one possibly manages their tan. You know, it's been a harsh winter. It's, we haven't had any summer holidays. Darren is laughing here. How do you keep that tan up, Darren?
This is not a fair question, everybody. Well, hold on. We had a record summer last year, and for those of you that were on video conferences with me, my office desk was in the garden. It was on my patio, so I was out all the time. So I just think I've kept this going for, just a long period of time. There might also be a few little tips of the trade, but who knows? That's a good question. Let's pass that on to somebody else. Okay.
We'll leave it there. I think you're just the expert on this, Darren. So I think we'll just leave it there. Perfect answer. So I hope this helps in answering some of your burning questions. Thank you so much for sending the questions in. There were a load to get through, and we've gone for the most popular questions. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. Back over to you, Alice.
Many thanks to you, Esther, and the panel. And for those of you who didn't have time to jot down the all-important name of the bronzer, please don't hesitate to get in touch with Darren directly. And for our penultimate item this afternoon, please welcome back Paul Wareham, who's in conversation here with Paul Creffiled.
Thank you, Alice, and great to be joining you again. Today, I will be joined by Paul Creffiled, Group Managing Director. He's agreed to spend some time with us this afternoon, just answer some of my questions, which should be interesting. So, Paul, 2021, it's been such a unique and transitional year for Countrywide. Be really interested in what your reflections are on the year so far and just overall on the Connells transaction.
Sure, Paul. I think it's in twofold, really. Firstly, it's bizarre, isn't it? We've got such a great property market out there off the back of COVID and the lockdown. I mean, it's obviously well reported in the press. But one of the standout things for me is, as a result of the back to basics that we started in 2018, we've made such good progress in 2021 so far. And in fact, the January and February results are the best since 2006, 2007. So for me, that's pretty standout. Sure signs that A, the market's good, but B, Countrywide itself is doing really well. You mentioned the Connells transaction. Of course, we've been working on that for some time. I think that's great for all stakeholders, so investors, our people, our suppliers, and it probably secures, I would say, the route forward. We could have gone standalone, but having done the Connells transaction now, it's great that we've created a clear number one in the market that's very, very strong. And we've got a bright future off the back of that. So I'm delighted to have managed to get it to that point.
Thanks, Paul. If we look back, you took the strategic reins of Countrywide back in 2018. And, 2 weeks ago, you handed them over. So what's kind of been the toughest part of the last 3 years in terms of navigating the group into the position it got to?
Gosh, I don't know. In some ways, it's gone quick the last 3 years, Paul, and in some ways quite slowly. The biggest challenge, was the debt that had been incurred since 2014 through to the beginning of 2018, and that was probably the number one priority. So pretty quickly, as we got into 2018, we had to deal with something called Project Crystal at the time, which was an equity raise, which was realistically in that market the only thing we could do. We got that away, but that was kind of the start of the journey, really. You'll recall we put the back to basics strategy in place, and I think certainly from let me just give you a couple of examples. Estate agency was quite badly affected over a 3 to 4 year period. And what we succeeded in doing is exactly what the title of the strategy was, back to basics. We got the right people in post doing the right things and the correct focus and rewards out of that. And for example, I think UK South was the area most affected. And for the last 3 years, they've had 20%, 30% and 20% year-on-year increase in profitability. The whole of sales and lettings have seen now year-on-year growth in profitability, and that's good. And conveyancing, of course, has been a beneficiary of that. We somewhat lost the way, I think, for a period on cross sales, but certainly over the last 3 years, as you all know, we've put a huge amount of focus on that. And the benefits would have been seen within conveyancing. So for me, I think, those are the things that really kind of stood out through that period.
Thanks, Paul. You, of course, you're in your second stint at Countrywide now, having started back in surveying way back when. Way back when. So your second stint would have been a bit different. I'm just interested to hear kind of what your proudest moment was since you've joined for the second time into Countrywide.
Yes, well, that was, back at the end of 2006, so a long time ago now. My timing was impeccable because we were almost straight into the global financial crash at that point, which was, as I say, kind of great timing on my part. Nevertheless, you dealt the hand of cards that you've got. And at that time, we knew we could manage our way out of that. And we did, along with all other businesses. And probably one of my proudest moments was to be asked by our private equity owners at the time, Oaktree, could you put in place a strategy for 3 to 4 years, which I did do, 2009 to 2012. And the driving aim of that strategy was to take us to a point where we could transact the business, which might mean we sell it or we IPO the business. And we used internal people to develop that strategy. The whole group got behind it for 3 years, really enjoyed it. And that culminated in 2013 with a very successful IPO. I think the other thing that stands out for me as a really kind of proud moment, I suppose, was being asked, and I can't remember the exact year, so kind of around about 2010 time, asked to have a look at conveyancing. And I remember I rocked up in Manchester one Monday morning, and I saw at the time Sue Leckenby and Alison Roberts, and I went and sat down in an office, and then I kind of quickly, almost within 24 hours, think, what a great business this is. There were issues at the time. And one of those was having kind of three bosses all trying to run the business, and there can be only one boss really. So we kind of set about a program which, the conveyancing management team, I got on really well with. And I would say we had great fun for 2 or 3 years building that business and getting it really admired within the group. And the proudest moment was probably alongside that IPO is to work with these people in conveyancing, as many of them are still there. So, it'd be unfair for me to just try and call them all out because I'll forget a couple, but working with those to put conveyancing on the map.
That was going to be my final question. I was going to talk to you about your fond memories of conveyancing. You've kind of covered that already, Paul, but do you want to elaborate a bit more, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a fine line between fond memories and being, proud of something. So I can understand, why that is. But probably a couple of things spring to mind, Paul, actually, just thinking about your question there. Back in around about 2010, it was a very similar period to what it is today, actually. There was a stamp duty holiday, and we all know what it's like. You get this big rush up to that deadline. Everyone wants to complete. And I was driving back from the Cardiff centre up to Manchester, and I took a call from Sue Spurgeon, who was our ops director, and the FD was on as well. And they were getting really worried about the amount of completions. They could see at least 400. And Steve, the FD, only wanted to do no more than about 300. And I said, well, look, come on, guys, let's talk this through. Sue, do you think we can do 400? If we make some changes, we plan it well. And she reflected on it for a moment and said, do you know what? I think we can. If we give ourselves enough time, we line the people up, we work hard at it, and we know what we've got to do. I think we can do it. And I'm pretty sure we can do it. And we ought to have that ambition. FD was, I'm not sure. I was thinking more like 300. So I said, look, we can do it, right? Let's go for it. Let's plan it well. And the business did. Everyone pulled together. There was a target that they felt was achievable, and there was demand from our customers to do it as well. So that was a really proud moment. And we did do it, and we did it comfortably. I can't remember the exact number, but it was around about 410 or so. So comfortably over the 400. And that was a big moment for me because it proved what we could do by working together. And it kind of reminds me of what I've been talking, and you'll remember this, Paul, and certainly if Jackie Longden's listening in, she'll remember with great trepidation at the time is when we agreed with HSBC that we would do separate representation for their non-panel customers. Neither ourselves or HSBC had any idea of the scale of what we'd both entered into. Within no time at all, we had a live pipeline of over 10,000 cases, and we had the likes of Alison Roberts, Rachel Walton, and a lot of other qualified people in the business actually carrying caseloads. So it was just an unbelievable time. Do you know what? It shocked us and it shook the bank, but HSBC remember it with fondness to say, actually, Countrywide Conveyancing worked with us. They're probably the only firm that could have dealt with this. And they worked with us, they talked with us, we worked together, and we worked through it. So I think that was a huge moment as well for me in kind of, you remember these moments of adversity almost with great fondness. And at the end of the day, the fond memories are around the people and what we did. So, Paul, that was probably kind of those fond memories, those two in particular, within conveyancing.
Thanks, Paul. And I know the colleagues we all work with in conveyancing will remember your time in conveyancing fondly as well. And you've announced your retirement later this year. We wish you well with that retirement, and I know from all of us, from me, from our colleagues in conveyancing and across the group, we all wish you well. Thank you for everything you've done for us. I think the last 3 years have been a challenge, but they've been fun, Paul, working with you. So thank you for that. Really appreciated.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. And with that, we'll hand back to Alice. Thank you very much.
A long and distinguished career with so many memories to be proud of. We wish you every success in your retirement, Paul. And now on to our final contributor of the afternoon. Here to tell us more about risk and decision making in an uncertain world, please welcome keynote speaker Caspar Berry.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Great Call. Risk-taking and decision-making in this new age of uncertainty that we're all just getting to grips with. My name is Caspar Berry, and it is my great pleasure to be talking to you today at your annual Countrywide Conveyancing Conference. In the next 15 minutes, I want to talk to you about uncertainty. I want to ask, what is it? Where does it come from? What causes it? What are the effects of it on all of us as individuals, as people, as decision makers? What do we tend to do about it as a result of that? And what do I think we could do about it or should do about it? What did I learn playing poker professionally in Las Vegas for 3 years that I've spent the last 15 years sharing with great companies like yourselves around the world? So, lots to get through. Let's start off. What is uncertainty? And there are no surprises here. It's the unknown, it's the unpredictable. At a macro level, it's the things that we've been dealing with for the last year of our lives, and indeed the last 4 years. And then at a micro level, it's the things that we all have to deal with whether we like it or not. Like to strike out and to make new deals, you have to trust people. And you don't know who's going to deliver on time and on budget and who's telling you the truth, and it's frustrating and confusing. But then it's also exciting, because when you watch sport, the thrill is that you don't know who's going to win. And I say watch sport, by the way, because if there's one thing that I have learned in 15 years of doing this job, it is that playing sport is really dangerous, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about mainstream Olympic stuff, things they give out medals for. Don't get me started on skiing long before you get to the slopes. Terrible things, embarrassing things can happen. No, I do not want that in my life. And that is why I want to take my risks in the quiet comfort of a poker room. And when I play poker, I am taking a risk. Why? Because I'm making a series of decisions, resource allocation decisions, in a world of obvious, overt, and undeniable uncertainty. Because I can't control the cards. And the next one could be the ace of hearts or the eight of diamonds, and there's nothing that I can do about that. And that's the same for you when you make decisions. In fact, the definition of a decision is the allocation of scarce resources under uncertainty. And yet, when you do it, you want to maximize your returns on investment and you want to be number one in the market. And believe you me, that's what we want when we play poker as well. And how do we all do that? Well, broadly speaking, we use information, right? We're trying to get as much information as possible. We're trying to use it intelligently. We're trying to give away as little as possible to the competition. And we have a phrase for that in poker, don't we? The poker face. It means to give away as little information as possible. Actually, these days in poker, we don't worry too much about the poker face because we've got the caps there and the shades you can see. And they're legal in most poker rooms. That's going too far. All right, folks, we want to see a nice fair game. But actually, that's what happens whenever we're playing online poker. We can't see our opponents. Online poker has totally changed the world of poker in the last 20 years or so. I mean, 80 years ago, that's a game of poker. Gnarled old men doing business in these smoky rooms. Fast forward to today, we've got much more diversity in the game, we've got more women in the game, and everyone's getting younger and younger and younger, which I do have mixed feelings about. I've got to be honest with you. How long before we see something of that nature? That's my concern, but we're not there yet. But who knows what the future holds? That's the nature of uncertainty. So let's go deeper into it. What causes uncertainty? Where does it come from? Well, as I've already shared, in poker, it's the turn of a randomly shuffled deck of cards. It sits in the middle of the table. It's quite a tiny thing, but it can change everything. And we have a phrase for that in business and life and science. We call that the butterfly effect. The idea that this tiny thing can change everything. And we've all seen the most profound example of that in our lives in the last year or so. When someone in Wuhan ate a bat or a pangolin, and as a result of that, the world's finances literally fall by 30%. And that's how you know your friends and family and colleagues, and that's how you feel safe going to the supermarket. That's the butterfly effect. a tiny thing with a huge impact. In fact, when you think about it, every single one of us, we're the product of a butterfly, a tiny thing. The sperm that fertilizes our mother's egg is the winning sperm of over 350 million at the time. What that means, incredibly, is that if your parents or your grandparents, God love them, or any of your ancestors going back through your family tree or to the beginning of life itself on this planet had met or mated just 2 seconds earlier or 2 seconds later, you would not exist in your current form today. And that applies to every single person on the planet. So if those two didn't meet at the exact moment that they did, we wouldn't have had him in our world. And if they didn't have some special time at that moment, then we wouldn't have had him in our world. And who knows how it would look without him. And the interesting thing about Las Vegas is that it takes that butterfly effect out of the shadows and it places it in the center of every table in the form of a randomly shuffled deck of cards, which we cannot predict and we cannot control. And if you want to play poker professionally, you just have to accept that. There's nothing we can do about it. You have to spend 10, 12 hours a day of your life every day engaging with that uncertainty. And that has an effect on us as human beings, literally, because we all have certain needs. Maslow tells us, doesn't he? Right at the bottom of our pyramid of needs, we all need safety. Security. It's down there with our basic needs: food, water, warmth, obviously Wi-Fi, if he was doing his pyramid today. What's he saying here? It is that we all need a sense of certainty and control over our lives. And therefore, we all tend to do certain things in response to this uncertainty to minimize it, to pretend that it doesn't exist in a way. We have laws to control the population, to feel safe as we walk down the road. We have the health and safety industry. Thank God we do. It saved hundreds, thousands of lives in the last century. How? When you think about it, by catching butterflies, by stopping people from doing something silly and small over here that could result in something much bigger and more profound down the line. And we do stop people. When you break it down. Signs and laws, everything is banned in this location. Leaning against a wall, carrying a violin. I have no idea where this actually is. This is an actual sign from a Japanese toilet. A lot of the things down the bottom there, I've never tried. I don't know that has tried, to be honest with you. Probably not a necessary sign, on balance. I know the people who put these up, they have our best interests at heart, but maybe the sum total of all of them is that we get a bit scared to do anything different, to step outside of the comfort zone. Why? Because all we see around us is danger and downside and warning and caution. Surface is hot. And there it is again in Braille, ladies and gentlemen, in a conductive metal. This sign causing a lot more accidents than it's preventing. Why? Because there is a limit to what we can control. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try and catch the butterflies. We've created the safest world we've ever lived in. All I'm saying is we're never going to catch everyone. And we know that, actually, because we have a second strategy when it comes to dealing with the uncertainty, which is to confidently predict the future. And we've been doing that for 6,000 years as well. The early belief systems were based on this idea that some people had a hotline to the gods, and we put those people on pedestals, and we paid them a lot of money, and we still do it today. In fact, billions of dollars are invested every single day on the strength of these kind of predictions. This is the Bank of England's actual prediction as to what the UK economy would look like in 2008, based on their prediction at the time of 2004. And the first thing we can all say about this is, they've given themselves some wriggle room, haven't they? Hey? The old Bank of England there. I mean, they've got top people working on this, but that fan, that spread is actually a very clever way of going, I don't know. That's basically what they're saying there. Even the Bank of England don't know exactly what the future's going to be. Why? Because it's determined by too many butterflies that are too tiny for even the best expert in the world to be able to know about all of them. And the important thing about this butterfly effect is that it's about interactions. It's about the cause and effect that one has on the other. So if we create a world with more interactions, then we are changing the very nature of uncertainty within the world in which we live. I mean, if you think about it, 100 years ago, the Spanish flu was taken out of the trenches and field hospitals of World War I to the countries around Europe by the soldiers who were returning home at the end of the war. Before Corona, we were making 2.5 billion air passenger journeys every single year. All of us carrying our own luggage, yes, but also ideas and germs. 100 years ago, that's how we consumed news. We heard what was going on around the world, huddled around the wireless. Fast forward to today, And we're all both consumers and creators of news. We're all interacting, broadcasting in ways that we never have before. And that is changing the nature of uncertainty from something that looks like this. Yes, it's a maze. Yes, there are uncertainties. Yes, there are decisions to make, left or right. But crucially, where there is always a right answer, to something like this, where maybe there isn't a right answer, where maybe in the time that it's going to take you to try and figure out what that is, maybe this problem's changed. Maybe someone else who doesn't mind being wrong has seized that opportunity and they have a competitive advantage as a result of it. Maybe making decisions in this new uncertain world requires a different method, a different approach. So what should we do about it? Well, I would argue passionately that in order to understand how to make decisions in a world of uncertainty, we should look to people who've been doing it for a couple hundred years. Why? Because when we play poker, that uncertainty is built into the system. There's nothing that we can do about it. We just have to accept it and get on with it. And what we know and understand as a result of that is that in order to maximize our returns in the long run, we need to be prepared to get it wrong, to make mistakes, to lose hands of poker in the short run. And that's not because we're not good. That's the greatest players that have ever played the game. Probably the greatest one ever is this guy, Doyle Brunson, now in his early 80s, just beginning to retire. He's worth $100 million. How do you make $100 million playing poker? You go out on a Tuesday in 1974 and you lose $10,000. And then you go out on the Wednesday and you lose $20,000 because the cards still don't come. And you go out on the Thursday and you lose $30,000, but you go out on the Friday and you do exactly the same thing, and you make $100,000. And you more than pay for those losses or investments, and you make a profit for the week. To make $100 million in a world of uncertainty, you have to be prepared to lose more money in the short run than most of us are going to see during the course of a lifetime. But he's still smiling. And that's why. No, that's not why. Why? It's because he's got $100 million. And that's the net. That's after the short-term losses have been taken into account. So look, after today, you want to hit home runs, right? You want to take it to the next level. So let's literally look at someone who hit more home runs during the course of his career than anyone else in history. This is Babe Ruth, and I'm sure you knew that statistic about him. But did you also know that he also hit more strikeouts than anyone else of his time? That is, complete misses of the ball that bring the other team into bat. Now, what that means is that by two different metrics, which is what this ultimately is about, he is both the best and the worst player of all time. And I put it to you that that's not a coincidence. That to hit a home run, you have to pull your bat back further and you have to swing harder, and you will give yourself a greater chance of missing the ball completely. But if what you want to achieve is home runs in a world of uncertainty where you can't control everything, that's what you have to do. None of you want to trust someone and have them let you down. None of us do. But Warren Bennis, professor of leadership at Harvard University, showed that the great super leaders, the Bill Clintons, the Bill Gateses, were lied to and let down more often than most normal people. Why? Because they trusted more people. They knew that that was the best way to get the best out of them, but that also meant that you were going to be let down more often. It's a short-term strikeout in order to hit those long-term home runs. Isn't it the case that the people that we tell the great stories about are the people who achieve the most, but the stories that we tell are about their failures and how they overcome them? So I leave you with one of those stories. We know this guy, Abe Lincoln, as one of the great presidents of all time, but have a look at his hidden life story. He failed in business in 1831. He was defeated for legislature in 1832. He had his second business failure in 1833 and a nervous breakdown in 1836 that confined him to bed for 6 months. But he gets up, and he's defeated for Speaker in 1838, and he's defeated for Congress in 1848, and he's defeated for Senate in 1855, and he's defeated for Vice President in 1856, and defeated for Senate again in 1858, before finally being elected President of the United States in 1860, and that's the long term, that's what we remember him for, that's the home run. But look how many times he had to strike out along the way. He was assassinated in 1865, all right, folks, which does show that risk-taking can be dangerous, and only you can be the judge of what you do and don't do as a result of this. I hope that what you've got from this presentation is a sense that, as frustrating as uncertainty is, it's always going to be there. In fact, probably it's going to get worse. But that our job is not to pretend that it doesn't exist, but engage with it. Because look, money left under the mattress gets no return at all. It is only by engaging with uncertainty that we create returns on investment and ultimately profit. So let's embrace it. Let's accept it. Let's do what a poker player does and work with it to create that competitive advantage. And I wish you the best of luck with all the decisions you make along the way. Thank you.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of proceedings for today. A big thank you to all the senior leadership team who've contributed to this afternoon's bulletin-style conference. Join us again tomorrow at 2 p.m. for our exclusive programme focusing on health and well-being, with special guest appearances from sleep expert Dr. Guy Meadows and double Olympic rowing gold medalist James Cracknell. Look forward to seeing you all then.